You can sit on the floor in front if you want. I don't care.
Ollie, should I reclaim host?
We'll bring it all.
It says you're the host. Should I reclaim it? Yeah.
We just gotta have time to be able to get out.
You know.
Call this meeting to order. If you please rise for pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson. Here. Mrs. Moore. Here. Mr. Shaboo.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of council, October 11th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo for approval. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Correspondence. Clerk, is there any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence.
Does anyone on council have correspondence tonight? Mr. Morris.
Mr. President, I received several emails back and forth with Dorinda Myers on Sharon Drive concerning the Parks and Rec Committee. She's curious as to what happened to it, and I explained to her that we've lost 3 people from that committee, and nobody has stepped up to take their place. But I do believe that unless something's changed, we're supposed to have a meeting tomorrow night.
No, sir.
That's canceled.
Yes. There was an email went out probably 2 weeks ago on that.
I must have missed that.
Yes.
So, and she was curious about the holiday lighting contest. So I guess I'll have to correct that too.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll go on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eba, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, the public here this evening. I'm going to turn over part of my report to Dan Buffer. Dan is a resident and has some ideas about Lake Overlook Beach Park, which I'd like to share with council.
Good evening, I'm Dan Walker. My residence is actually 5946 Hopkins in there, but we have a secondary residence on Thunderbird, 5884. Lifelong resident of Menor, and have seen a lot of changes in shoreline and problems that are here. I forwarded a picture to Mary Eva a while back. I don't know if you all got a chance to see it, which I can pass it around. This is Menor Beach Park 40 years ago. And I would just hate to see that happen to Overlook Park. And Overlook Park has obviously been taking a beating for the last 5 or 6 years because of the high water. And as a young child, I grew up at Menor Beach Park, remember it fondly. And it was in the late 70s, early 80s that we had a high lake situation like we've had the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm assuming it was the city of Menor that did that. They basically destroyed that park by putting armor stone in front of it. I mean, a lot of the things they could have done, like Sims Park in Euclid, they could do offshore islands and could have preserved the beach. There hasn't been a beach there in 40+ years. Now, at Overlook Park, I've been in contact with a company in Florida, LEW Inc., and they're a dredging contractor. I talked with the president of the company. They do large and small dredging projects all over the country, mostly in Florida, but they have portable dredges. Just to get some rough idea of something maybe that could be done here to typically hasn't been done on Lake Erie, and I don't know why, which is a beach replenishment projects. You go down through Florida, the Carolinas, it's done all the time. They bring in dredges, they pump the sand, come out in the ocean somewhere, they rebuild the beaches, and, you know, barring a major catastrophic hurricane event, it lasts for a while. And I think Lake Erie would last for a while also if they could just, if the Army Corps people could stabilize the lake levels. When the lake levels fluctuate widely, it overruns the beach and starts pounding into the shoreline, and it's tough to get beach back again. What's interesting at Overlook Park is because of the erosion that's taken place, it's created a cove. The cove right now is a lot of sand right there. I mean, lake levels right now are a foot above average for this time of year. So we're still over average, but yet we have beach back. And that's 3 feet higher than it was at record lows just 7 years ago. So we're still, but it's actually building beach. And it's predominantly because of the way that is formed there. You end up creating a trap for sand. So as the winds blow out of the west, it can trap in as it blows out of the east. Now there is a structure there that I think could be extended, which is the storm sewer system that's there. Right now, that extends from the concrete structure about 40 feet. There's 5 sections, each of them are 8 feet. If the city, and I would love to see like a pilot project, maybe we could work in conjunction with federal authorities, state authorities, if we could do like a fishing pier where that structure is and extend it to be a total of like 100 feet. Line it with armor stone. Now you can have a flat top deck, people could fish from it, but it's going to do 2 things. It's going to provide recreation, and it's also going to provide a break to let the sand continue to fill in behind it. And if you look at the way it's down there right now, you can just see the sand is filled in out to the end of that structure. So if you extended it out another 60 feet, you could pretty much year round keep sand in that cove in front of Overlook Park. Now there's companies that make, and I keep a pipe company, I'm not sure what that, but they make precast structures, which they use under roadways whenever they put streams and things underneath. Something like this would be perfect for there. You could build those in between the existing structure that's there. It becomes an outlet for your storm sewer, it becomes a deck for on top for a fishing pier, and you just line it with armor stone, and nature will do its thing there. But back to the dredging, a lot of people don't realize how affordable that is. So when I talked to this Les Woodring, how much does it cost for, you know, small dredges? Lake Erie's prime candidate for dredging. It's only 10, 12 feet deep, half mile out where you can get to the sand. Their charge rate is about $3,000 a day. Now you'd have to have transportation to get it here, but it can be transported on a semi. And I said, well, how much sand can you dredge? This is in optimal conditions, they can do about 500 cubic yards a day. Now, to put that in perspective, at Overlook Park, I stepped it off. The park's about 120 yards from the storm sewer structure over to the Brown property at the east end. You took 120 yards that way. You went 30 yards out to the lake, which is almost 100 feet, and you went 3 yards deep, which is 10 feet. That's only a little over 10,000 yards. That would only cost about $65,000 to rebuild the sand in there. And like I said, if you did something with the structures that are there to help prevent it from just washing away again, it would last a long time. Now, there's obviously still another problem at Overlook Park, which is the hillside, which even right now, without the waves hitting it, it continues to slump off because it's not secure. So the hillside needs to be secured in some way, but I would hope they would do it in a fashion that isn't just done like Leonard Beach Park, so that we never have. But anyway, I've talked to Mary Eva a couple times. Would love to see like some kind of a community committee, get some people together to look at these different options, find out if there's any kind of grant money available that would help pay for some of these things. But I just would hope that we don't let Overlook Park go the way of Leonard Beach Park. Any questions I can answer?
Thank you.
Here's just like a rough we have this too, it's just a rough sketch I did on top of a layout, how far, what 100 feet would look like.
I did check with ODNR earlier this summer about the pier off there. They said it is doable, and there's grants available for it. There's also grants available for the engineering that's got to be done, because there's a lot of engineering.
Well, it's easy to see and look at, like I said, I've been involved in a lot of things, I'm not an engineer, but like I said, we get the balls rolling, like I said, something like that with just 100 feet. Again, you'll keep beach, and then you protect your shoreline, because if you have beach, it becomes a natural damper from when we have storms. So,
I just thought I'd bring Janet, we've had several conversations. Cost of, adding the beach is far less than, the cost of the revetment, but we still need the revetment. Lake Elementary Trunk or Treat event is this Thursday, October 27th, from 5:30 to 6:30. We're still looking for volunteers for that. If you're interested, please let me know after the meeting. I sent an email to each of the council members showing the population trend. I'd like to discuss this in new business, and also talk about a rental inspection process in new business later on. Who's going to report?
Thank you. Administrative Director, Mrs. Bartone, good evening. Okay, thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, no report.
Are there any questions for the administration? Hearing none, we will move on to board committee commission reports. Community development.
Yes, Mr. President, we met on October 13th, and then again on the 20th. We started at 7 p.m. The purpose was to discuss the idea of a master plan for the city. Present was myself, Lee Shaboo. Unfortunately, Desiree was not able to make it. President Rob Johnson was present, as well as Mr. Schick, Mr. Kowalski, Mr. Ferris, and Mr. Cleveland. The meeting started with a discussion on different mission and vision statements that are being proposed. A compilation of all the vision statements were done, as well as mission statements to come up with for a final proposal vote. There was a brief discussion on a proposed city plan and how we should proceed from there, and the meeting adjourned at 8:30. If I may continue, sir. We met again on the 20th. Can you continue the discussion? Started at 7 o'clock, finished at 7:55. Present with myself, Lee Shaboo. Desiree was unable to attend again. There were several residents present. The meeting started on time. We reviewed the progress that had been done. We discussed that the work we have done could be a standalone project or integrated into a company project. Everyone present seemed to think that the Adventure Group was the better of the two presentations done for council. There was a brief discussion as to if we should issue a request for qualifications to check out other companies. No decision was made, and the meeting adjourned at 7:55.
Any other boards and commissions that met? Hearing none, we will go on to open to the public to speak. Oh, Service Director, Mrs. Bartone, did you have anything? I figured not, since you didn't get that first part, so. Thank you. All right, now we'll go on to open to the public to speak. If you'd like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. Again, this is an opportunity to speak to council, not a discussion back and forth. This is an opportunity for you to put it into the public record as to any of your concerns.
Happy to do that. Jeff Schick, 7533 Salida, and I want to back up what Dan said about ways to look at that sand, ways to look at the pier idea. That's a great idea, both sides, and put a bigger one down on the Center Beach Park. And the revetment side of it, there are probably 15 or 16 different types of revetment strategies that have been tried between the two parks. And I'll be glad to let anybody come and spend some time looking and talking about how we did ours. Nature will give every piece of property its own angle of repose. And you have to analyze it by the amount of clay that's below your soil on every property. So it's not going to be the same everywhere. It's not a cookie cutter. So you have to really analyze that part of it. It makes sense to me that if that clay level below the park is in the ranges like mine was, between 18 and 8 feet, you could easily reach a nice 30-degree angle of repose and not have big blocks of wall, big stone, making it unsightly or unapproachable. So a lot of different ways to handle that revetment if you have a plan for the sand and a way to recoup that. That's all I have. Thanks.
Bill Cleveland, 7607 Sabino Road. I'd also like to thank the mayor for moving Dan forward and Dan for a very interesting analysis. I think there's a lot of good elements to what Dan had to say. A couple things that come to mind. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, who have the note, the storm drain you're talking about is on the west side of our park, is that correct? Okay. I spent the last 30 years or so studying erosion control locally, dealing with various municipalities and the Corps of Engineers. One of the things that's very clear is that the sand comes from interrupting the littoral drift. The littoral drift is the natural tendency of the lake to move sand from west to east towards Buffalo. To wit, if we were to follow your concept, which I like very much, the only shortcut is that to create a permanent beach, the pier or growing or whatever we put out needs to be on the east side of the beach, next to the ground property. Because the natural tendency of the lake is to create beach on the west side of anything that sticks out. Yes, easterly winds, they will move things around a bit, but the general process is you stick out into the lake, it disrupts the drift of the sand drops out and forms a beach. The idea of, I wish the storm drain was on the east side, because that would be perfect for those hollow nodules. Drop them in their concrete, although the last week or so it's gone nuts. In general, is a pretty cheap material. And those nodules, oh my God, that was a fantastic idea. And something like that might be usable anyway, even without the storm drain. But the idea of creating a recreational surface up here and protecting it with armor stone is exactly the way it's done. If you go to Headland Park and look at the huge groin the Corps of Engineers built, that's exactly the deal. There's a flat surface that runs horizontally out to the lighthouse, and each side has armor stones at an angle. And as Jeff had mentioned, the blue clay, which is the glacial till, forms a layer anywhere from 8 feet to maybe 18 feet down along the lake in this area. And the natural angle of repose when it's wet, so this wet is a viscous fluid, is 30 degrees. So if you bring the embankment and the blue clay to 30 degrees, even when it's wet, it'll stay there, it doesn't slump anymore. The only caveat is that if the waves can make it to the foot of the embankment, to the toe, it doesn't matter what angle you have, the waves will chew away the toe. So now it's vertical. Now it has to slope or slump to fill in that gap. This is now vertical. So that little triangular cross section is missing. The thing will slope to fill that in and regain the 30-degree angle of repose. Now, none of this changes the concept the dam is proposing. It doesn't need to be 100 feet. I put in several groins along here and over into East Lake and Wellwood. And basically, even 40, 50 feet is enough to knock down the drift. With the fact that we now have a cove that's been formed is a plus, because the east side of the cove effectively is sticking out into the lake, sort of. So the west and northwest winds bring the waves in that direction, and the cold and the brown revetment that they put in are the beginning of a jetty that goes out to do that. So extending it at that point definitely will create a stable beach. You don't have to put armor stone all the way to the top of the revetment of the park. Typically, they go up about 20 feet, which gets the wave splash. So that protects the toe. And the rest of the embankment is fine. As long as the toe is protected, the rest of the embankment is fine. At 30 degrees, you can even run a mower up and down it. So thank you very much for sharing that. Thanks for listening. And hopefully this will give us a more solid basis to move forward for something a lot less than $1.2 million. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we will move on to, I will close this portion of the public to speak. We'll move on to legislation before council. Ordinance number 2022-0-19, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-19, second reading, amended. An ordinance creating chapter 1255, planned unit development, PUD district of the codified ordinances.
Any amendments or discussion on this? Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
President, I myself, I don't know about the rest of council, maybe I'm missing another email, but I have not received the updated version of that. Have you folks? So I don't know, the amendments that planning and zoning wanted to make, I don't have a copy of that. I haven't seen it. Firstly, I'm against the PUD. I've stated that multiple times because I think it's unsafe personally. And I think the reason it came up is because a couple of residents after that last, one of those last planning and zoning meetings said, we'd have been better off with this than it is with the senior apartments under the art stuff. I don't necessarily think so, but that's my opinion. I think putting that into a residential area is still a mistake. That's again, my opinion. I know I'm shared by a lot of people. I just don't know why we're bringing this up again. One is, where's the updated version?
I'll tell you, I finally edited it this afternoon. It was 2 tiny little things, and I will send you a copy of it as soon as I get around to it. But you're not voting on it tonight anyway, so it's not a big urgent rush to get to you.
My piece.
And you should have received the minutes for the planning and zoning meeting, which had them in there. So if you didn't read that, you should have.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none. This will go on to third reading. And the public hearing will be at the next meeting of council. Ordinance number 2022-0-20, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-20, an ordinance ratifying the collective bargaining agreement with the full-time firefighters and authorizing the mayor and administrative director to execute a written contract with the Mentor Lake firefighters, IAFF Local 3049, and declaring an emergency.
Question.
Yes.
When is their contract up?
This is January 1st this year.
So it's already, so we should be doing this now.
Any other questions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Moore. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
No.
Mrs. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
No,
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Motion fails. Needs 5 votes. Suspend the rules. Ordinance number 2022-0-21, if you could please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-21, an ordinance levying liens for expenses incurred for lawn maintenance and or culvert repairs.
Any questions on this ordinance?
Any repeat offenders on this one? All
motion to suspend.
second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-22. Please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-22. An ordinance establishing a 6-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for zoning and or occupancy permit approvals for elderly apartments in the area designated as the R-top area in the Minner-on-the-Lake zoning ordinances and the issuance of such approvals in the city of Minner-on-the-Lake and declaring an emergency.
Is there any discussion? Is there any motion?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris. Is there a second on this? Hearing none, it will go on to second reading. Old business. Is there any old business tonight? Hearing none. New business. First of all, we have a open position for the substitute clerk of council. So if anyone knows anyone who has clerical skills, typing, we would appreciate applications for that. Second thing was the population trends in the city. If Mayor Eva wanted to.
Sure. I
Discuss that
I
further?
sent this out for the weekend. And I guess I would like to hear from each council member. When I looked at it, looking at, let's say 1995, we had a population of 8,756 compared to 2020, 7,133, a decrease of 18.5%. Compared 2005 to 2020, we had a decrease of 14%. 2013 to 2020, a decrease of 4%. My question to council would be, do you find this to be a concern, or does this seem normal to all of you? Yes, sir.
If I may, I'm curious how this fares with other communities in our county.
I don't worry about that.
Well, I do, because if this is a trend, then maybe it's just a trend that applies to us as well.
That's something I didn't look at.
I'll go ahead and start.
Sure.
My thoughts on it are there are multiple factors that influence this. One is that we have a community of smaller homes. They're very good for starter homes. So we have people who are just starting out buying homes in the city that then once they have children, outgrow their home and move out of the city. That's one of the reasons why I supported having the CRA, is to hopefully allow people to add on to their homes, expand them in such a way so that they would stay in our community. I also think we have a older community. We have a lot of residents who have either moved into the community early on when they first built their home and have lived in this community for decades. And as such, they had children. Those children have now grown up and left the community, and they are now in their twilight years, if you will. I mean, look at council.
What are you trying to say? You should be
I
offended.
say twilight.
I'm defending.
I mean, you had kids and your kids have moved out, and these things happen. In addition to that, I think those are some of the biggest things that influence it, but, other thoughts?
My thoughts, if you look at your statistics that you put down here from 2010 to 20, what is the greatest decrease in the numbers? Children.
Right, when you look at,
That's-
and that was.
That's the base,
Right.
children. So am I concerned? No. People just aren't having children, or they're not moving here. I mean, all the other ones are pretty darn close.
Yeah, if you look at, the age, I mean, the largest increase between 10 and 20 is in your 60 to 69. And why I bring this up is we've had a lot of discussion over the last 10 months about housing, things like that. Where we see a decrease in people, but we're not concerned about losing people. So we're not adding to the housing. And to Mr. Johnson's point, yeah, when you look at the age, we're losing younger probably because we don't have big enough homes for, 5 people in a family or something like that. But this whole thing with our part of that, when we look at 2010 to 2020, we have a 4% increase in 60 to 69, 1% 70 to 79, 2% 80 and older. When I talked to Mary Ellen Brannick, which I have put a note on your graph there at Andrew's place, she has approximately 61 to 67 people on the waiting list. The waiting list is about 3 years to get in there. I know it's subsidized, which, I'll acknowledge, but, are the people waiting already in Mentor Lake? Do we have people that say, I love to be in Mentor Lake. I just can't maintain a home anymore. I want to stay here, but where could I go? And when I ask myself that question, I say, well, we only have one place here for senior housing. That's it.
So I guess my comment to that would be that sounds like an argument against the PUD and having more senior housing. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me, but.
And I, on the other hand, would say, I just think there's not enough housing in general. If you drove around here and saw for sale signs everywhere, that would be of concern. We don't. I, for example, used to be a household of 4, down to 1. Same house, but 1 person. Numbers change. I think we need more housing. There is a need for it.
Right.
And yet it's kind of curious. I was told, I haven't checked into this, that Lake Elementary had to hire another kindergarten teacher this year because there's more kindergartners who are in this year than have been in the past. So yeah, I think our city is turning around again. It's us older people are dying or moving on to assisted living homes, and younger families are coming in. Potentially.
Anybody else?
If you paid attention to these kinds of things over the years, it tends to be cyclical. It'll go up where your older population rises, and then it'll kind of turn around, and as they start moving out and moving on, you'll start to see a younger population moving in. It's very cyclical. To me, it tells me a lot of things. One, people aren't having large families like they used to. Instead of having maybe 3 or 4 kids, they might be having none, 1 or 2. It tells me that our population is getting older. We've known that. We've talked about this for many, many years. Monroe Lake is an aging population. I've said this many, many times. I want this to be a city where our kids want to come back and raise their families. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I would like to see that happen. But if we don't come up with a way to promote the city and make this a place where people want to live and come back and raise a family, these numbers aren't going to match. We need to be respectful of any age group. This shouldn't be, do we need to focus on the elderly population or the younger population? We need to look at this as a community as a whole and have some diversity and some variety.
Anyone else?
One last part of the comment for me is, in looking at the age brackets, 25 to 44, and 45 to 59. I know when my son sold his house on Pinehurst before he moved down to the one on Lake Street, the realtor said Mentor Lake's got an advantage to any other community in the area. We have access to better schools, but the housing stock here is not the high price stuff that a lot of Mentor is. So that's a plus to our city. But you look at it. So I think it's an advantage. And she said, in her knowledge, realtors do promote that.
And I want to say, when we first moved here to Marana Lake, we're a family of 4. Kids grew up, moved out, got married. My son just recently came back to Marana Lake and bought a house on Goldenrod. So he liked the community and he just wanted to be back. So I think, you know, he's a single guy. And the house is just like what Rob said. It's just a starter home. It's just a 3-bedroom little ranch home. And there wasn't much in the market when he was looking in his price range for a single person. And Mentor Lake had what he was looking for, and it was the place that he wanted to be. So I think, you know, with the limited market that we do have in homes and the size of the homes, you know, it's going to be dependent on all of these age groups. You know, like somebody coming in and they're 60 to 69, they might not want to be on the Marine Park side of the area. They might want to be over here on the Andrews Road side with the smaller ranch homes. So we have to be open to what everyone is doing.
I think there's a large senior population that are gonna be moving into senior housing. We're building them now in the big market. There is a big. And I go along with that. So.
Anything else? What was the other topic we were supposed to discuss?
The other topic on my mind is rental inspection
Ah.
process. And we have run across several instances over the last several weeks. A couple calls that I have had from neighbors. I get my neighbor move out next door. I know it was a rental. Well, the whole side yard has trash, tires, so on and so forth. Okay, let me come out and take a look. This was on a Sunday, so I went out there. Coincidence, there was a guy there that was looking at the house I was looking at, and I said, "What's going on here?" I just got a call from one of the neighbors. He said, "Well, my nephew owns the house. He's down south. He had no idea that this is the condition of this property." One instance. Last week, at another instance, down closer to the lake here. Got a call about there's no water in a rental property. You know, did you know the condition of the property? Well, no, I didn't even know, you know, electrical, plumbing was in disarray. And I know what council's been looking at is rental inspections and things like that. What I talked to Holly about was, if we go back to the landlord or the property owner that's renting and say, look, I want to get every year from you an attestation that you know who lives there. I want a name, I want a phone number, but also I want to know that you've been in there, you've inspected, and electrical, plumbing, if there are things that need to be done, that you're going to take care of that. Because as you know, we don't go in. And for one, my opinion is for us not to go in, to make us liable for something we may miss. I would put it back on, you own the property, you rented the property. I don't care if you're down south or where you're at. I want something every year telling me that you inspected or looked at it. And I want to know who's in there and the phone number, because these people somehow take off. We have no idea who's in there. And, you know, these things, then we get a call about, hey, you know, people just abandon the house next door. There's all this junk that needs to be cleaned up. We send the service department out there if there's nobody there to take care of it. Luckily, the incident where I found a relative who was shocked at the property, he was able to put most of the stuff out for garbage the next day and cook it. But the other one this past weekend was, you know, what am I going to do now? There's no force for the old renter.
So we're both registered with the rental apartment houses?
Yes. But again, how much interaction between owner and the renter? You know, do you just say, okay, you've been in there 5 years, I'm just gonna assume that, you know, everything's okay in there? And then when everybody moves out, you know, relative goes in because the other relative that owns it is down south that says, you know, we got $10,000 to $20,000 worth of damage that we have to fix. That's it for me.
Okay.
Just something to think about.
The one with no water, was it the tenant who had no water?
The
Or they
tenant,
vacated and it
yes,
was discovered?
the previous tenant was evicted. And without the owner knowing, turned the water on. The new renter went in and said, you know what? I don't have any water. And, you know, it was a Saturday. So luckily I called Aqua Ohio, we got the water turned on, it was an emergency thing. But how do you not know as the owner, you know, what's going on? Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? How is the ordinance committee coming on that topic?
I just, not just, but I did get, there's the questions that we had from Ms. Bartone. I got those after our last council meeting. So I was gonna set a council meeting or an ordinance meeting for that tonight.
Okay, sounds good. Any other new business tonight? Hearing none, we will go to open to the public to speak. Yeah, this is an opportunity for you to speak to council. Come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Earl Curtis. I live at 7523 Salida Road. And my take on the statistics that the mayor said about population density and age going up and down and all that stuff, I think I think it's more important to look at how developed all the land is, which we know that the amount of development occurred, and then also look at with that land that's already developed and whatever's left to be developed, what kind of city do we want to become? And so you need to have the right blend of different types of housing, the right blend of different types of businesses, the right blend of stuff, so that you can attract what you want to attract in the city. So it's the population, as Michelle Moore said, will always go up and down. But I think it's looking at the property, looking at the condition of the properties, and looking what's developed is to me the correct answer. And so more about the percentages of types of each property, percentages of what's going on, just to get a reflection on the kind of city that we'd like to be. So.
Anyone else?
So Tess Turry, 7373 Salida. About the PUD. I'm tired. Like, I can't believe that this is back up for, for business. But the last meeting I was able to attend was the planning and zoning meeting on September 12th. And I believe it was you, Paul, who mentioned that at that meeting, the issue of maximum density was brought up, and it did cause confusion back and forth. And the comments was made about, how can 71 apartments be less dense than 37 townhomes? And then it was also brought up that, gosh, we made a mistake with voting down the PUD. And for the record, you absolutely did not get it wrong the first time. We did not get it wrong. And here it is, a month and a half later, and it's back on the table. Nothing significantly has changed, like in the couple minutes that I had to read through this. It is the same players, the plan is basically the same, and here we go again, another knee-jerk reaction. See you later, senior living, that we, seems to be good use. And hello, townhomes, yet again. And so I wonder if it was the misunderstanding and confusion around utilization of space and the density, understanding what is meant by maximum density. Did that prompt the PUD to be back up for visiting? And if so, why wasn't planning and zoning asked to clear up any misconceptions or confusion on it? Because during that meeting on the 12th, planning and zoning, at about 50 minutes into it, because I had to listen to it again, it was broken down for us, an explanation, probably on the simple side, but basically saying that 71 units, apartments in a 3 building works out to approximately 9 units per acre. And that of 35 to 37 townhomes, that number was talked back and forth, it works out to 14 units per acre. There were other details that were discussed about what is meant by the land utilization and density. So listen to it, go back and listen to planning and zoning on September 12th. About 50 minutes in is where this discussion comes up. Why I feel we do not need, did not and do not need a PUD is to confer with Mentor, because there is a lot of action over at the Mentor Beach Park. That restaurant is moving forward. You may be in a better position to know how far, how fast than I, but should or when this goes through, it's going to undoubtedly bring in droves of people. I'm not a city planner, but you would expect that the ripple effect this would have to a mixed-use development within walking distance of that restaurant, it would be, it's very significant. So I'm not talking Ferris wheels or big, huge pine crest developments. I'm talking about a few businesses that are scaled to the size and the personality of Mentor on the Lake. Something like was being discussed before. Let's tailor this to what we need, who's here now and who do we want coming in. Where was I? Just lost my place. But yeah, and have a few of those little businesses, important businesses like Pelicans or something, along with some residential units, be they senior or not, or both, or who knows. And we have the potential to generate some revenue from and around the lake. We have the potential to have something that aligns with the owner's stated desire to do something that enhances our community. And it would also be profitable for a developer. So it's using the Mentor Beach restaurant to open doors or open opportunities for us in Mentor on the Lake may cause some concerns. I know that it's just a simple, the way I put it out here is simple. There might be traffic concerns. I get that. Anything going on in that property, in that space is going to cause traffic concerns. So if you're worried as a resident or city leadership about traffic, I mean, that's gonna have to find a solution for it down the road anyway. I wouldn't let that stop progress, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this is totally probably random and weird, but it's me, so I'm gonna say it anyway. I kind of wrote out, kind of summed up some of what went on over the last few months, and maybe this is why I'm tired and frustrated, and maybe some of you guys are tired and frustrated. But this whole process started, and this is all to my knowledge, started with the Summers Group presenting to planning and zoning developments or plans for 70 apartment units, a 70-unit apartment complex. There were several different plans that were drawn up, and planning and zoning did review them. And there were either some concerns were raised, or there was some discussion going on, and follow-up was left on the table because I could not find any video recording of planning and zoning meetings where Summers Group came back to planning and zoning and presenting or reviewing any of that apartment those apartment plans, I should say. I looked in all the meetings that were around that time frame. I could have missed something, but I never saw Summers Group present their 70-unit apartments again. Then at I think it was a meeting, council as a whole or something like that, Summers Group did present again, but it was 35-ish townhomes. That's when community engagement was ramped up and kind of went into that circular FUD discussion, make changes, vote on it, FUD, whatever, planning and zoning, back and forth mess. Which then led to a meeting where the property owner gave a really impassioned presentation that basically laid out her work with and faith in the Summers Group to develop high-end senior apartment units. And that was the first time I had heard that issue coming up. Don't know where that came from, kind of confused me a little bit. Then the PUD was voted down, which gets us closer to where we are today. And Summers Group and Elaine Crane realized there was our little loophole that allowed them to build the 71 senior apartments. I mean, maybe this is what Elaine was talking about the months prior when she mentioned it. And here we are back with the PUD and Summers Group wanting their townhouses again. So tell me, like, I really, and I get this is not discussion, I understand it, but I'm laying it out there for you. You all were the people that worked on the zoning changes in that area and determined it to be, was it business one? That it was, okay. You made those decisions purposely. And those of you who voted down the PUD did so because the plan, the PUD that was laid out in front of you by the developer didn't represent enhancements unique enough to override your original zoning decisions or plans. And reading through it again today, it's basically the same thing. There's nothing consequentially different. My question to you rhetorically, how could opinions change when details have stayed the same?
Yeah. I will make one comment, and that is that council has been given basically a choice. We have the choice between high-density senior apartments, because that is allowed in that zoning, or the PUD and having townhomes. So either way, we're going to have to choose between high-density housing of one type or another, owner-occupied townhomes or high-density senior apartments.
Well, and if you take.
I'm not done talking. Do not interrupt me, please. Again, this is not a back and forth discussion. It's my chance to make my statement. Okay? So we listened to what the residents have been telling us at the planning and zoning meeting, where we heard a lot of people say, we'd rather have townhomes than a whole bunch of apartments, which will add to even more traffic, more stress on our fire department, rescue squad, etc., as we have more elderly people living in our city. And so what we did was discuss with the Summers Group the opportunity to bring back the PUD as an alternative to having the high density apartments of seniors. And so that is how we got back to where we are today.
Thank you, that helps. Confer with your planning and zoning who had in their explanation, the senior apartment plan was a better utilization of space and it had less. Listen again, listen to September 12th. I don't know what meeting, I haven't been able to attend meetings to do the job, but I tried to stay up by listening after the fact. So if there was community input on I'd rather have townhomes, that's not a grouping. That is not the aggregate of what your residents and constituents are feeling. That's all I'm saying. Knock on doors, maybe, I don't know.
Anyone else?
Well, I guess that would be me. I'm not sure I can remember all the things, but I would once would like to thank the mayor for checking out these rental properties. more attractive, particularly for younger people to come in. Maintenance of these properties is a big deal. People drive around the neighborhood and they see old tires in the yard and trash and grass on top. This is not part of the image that we want to project. So thank you for doing that, and I think it's an excellent idea somehow to have an annual update dialogue or something to make sure the properties are not allowed to look like Tobacco Road. Number two, demographics. S'more made a good point. The population's up and down, but in men around the lake, and these are just demographics, this is not the racial bias or anything like that. It's mostly a Caucasian city. And demographically, the Caucasians in this country are reproducing at less than replacement value. So of the, most of the people in this room are represented in that group. And this group, whether it's aging or not, is not producing children at replacement rate. This is a national statistic. On top of all the other things that were mentioned about the aging population and kids moving out and going where they can get jobs, and so on and so forth. So I don't think this is a panic situation. I don't think that we want to attract people to our city. Don't we want to attract younger, perhaps professional people? Building senior apartments, yeah, those are needed in the country, here and there. We, as we discussed, we already have slightly more than 40% of our population in rentals. I don't feel it's incumbent on our city to necessarily jump up to meet the needs of the aging population. Therefore, I'm really not in favor of any kind of high density rental. Next subject, the PUD. Thank you, Mr. President, for clarifying where we are on that. And there are two issues there. One is, I want to say personally, if we have to pick between two choices, I would prefer the owner occupied condos or townhomes or whatever they're going to call them. Secondly, along those lines, it appears to me that, we're dealing with some very smart and clever people, Lane Crane, Greg Summers, and whatever. And these people are on top of their game. My personal opinion is that they may prefer the townhomes. And basically, looking at the RTAR obsolete item that's been referred to, is just a bargaining chip. It's coercion, it's leverage, whatever you want to call it, to get us to go back, reinstate the PUD, put in the high density housing. Not as high as the rentals, but still high density housing. To that end, I'm wondering, and I asked Mr. Lyons and our mayor and Holly, what does RTAR stand for? Where did it come from? And why is it still here? Is it even a program that still exists? I've done a bunch of online research and I've talked to a couple of our council members. Nobody seemed to really know what it is, other than it had something to do with the federal subsidy for senior housing. But that was back in, I believe, the 80s. And there's no evidence so far, and Mr. Morris may have more information on this. I know he's been trying to contact somebody at the state and federal level to clarify, is RTAR even around? If it's not, if it's an obsolete defunct program, and then it has no validity in our zoning ordinances. It doesn't pertain anymore. Therefore, it's not available. And I would ask, who's got answers to this? I don't expect an answer now, but
I
think
will
this is-
clarify that
Oh, you have that? Thank you.
in terms of, not in terms of what RTARP is. I will let Mr. Lyons spell out what RTARP stood for, but in terms of its validity, the RTARP area was defined in our ordinances. What business one allows is senior apartments, but only in the RTARP area. So the RTARP area is still going to exist whether the program exists or not. And so therefore the senior apartments are allowed in that business one district in that area.
Thank you for that. I guess the only remaining question in my mind, this would be a legal question for Mr. Lyons.
It's really not.
It is a legal.
You can put it to play.
Well, it is a question of, so if the program that created an area no longer exists, is that still a valid area, even though we've written it down? Wasn't that to accompany the program? And when the program goes away, why would that still be a valid designation for that use?
I have to defer to the chair to know whether or not.
You are allowed to answer. You feel free.
Thank you.
I think this started in 78 or 79. Federal program that is not called RTARP. Federal program provides federal subsidies for building senior elderly apartments. City applied for that program ability depended upon a study to determine whether or not there was a lower income in the city that met the requirements of that federal program, that federal subsidy. RTARP, I'm not sure about the second R, but I believe it stands for Andrews Road Target Area Regional Program. So that area, RTARP, so that area, that consisted of, I believe, some census blocks was determined in the city back in 79 in order to allow senior housing, or it wasn't allowed for created this overlay district. And they called the RTARP area to allow senior housing in that area. So by the federal program is gone, that zoning designation for that overlay district has remained. And since 1979, 1980, if anybody in that district wanted, whatever the zoning was at the time, wanted to build senior housing in there, then they would have been allowed, even if it had been whatever else the zoning was. So the reason I said your question wasn't a legal one, okay, is because it was the designation area was just to accommodate the flow of federal funds to show that we were eligible. And in order to provide for proper zoning to allow that building that is free away built and to get that federal funds, which I think were almost all used to build that. And RTARP was added in. So now, is it needed anymore? Could there be different, could it be eliminated instead? Could the city create a different overlay area? The answer to that is a legal question. The answer is yes.
Thank you for that.
But I think, does that answer your question?
It did, and thank you for that. I know this has been brought up amongst many members of the community, so that's a big help.
If you find out what the second R stands for.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
But
I think it's
that's-
pretty good.
I think you're pretty close there. I will-
You know what? Rehabilitation. The Andrews Road Target Area Rehabilitation Program.
if you-
Right, there you go.
I don't know if it's right or not, but I will.
I think that's right.
Thank you. I will point out that last spring, early summer, the RTAR thing was brought up. Both the zoning and that probably whatever it is where you get to talk, maybe the whole, I suppose. And it was mentioned by several members of the committee, or at least a couple, that we need to get rid of that, which we could have done at that point without contest. I don't know if we can still do that or not. But it's, doesn't seem to fit any vision that's, being discussed and developed for the city. So if we're stuck building the high density stuff over on Elaine's property, and then I would certainly prefer the owner occupied stuff, people at least gonna have some skin in the game here in the city. My last question, and this may not be the answer now, would really be addressed to you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of weeks ago, I formally asked to be put on the community development, something blah, blah, committee. Has my application been reviewed? Are you considering moving forward with that committee?
Can I answer that?
You feel free.
Thank you. Here is my thinking on that. Okay, council right now is looking at potentially 2 consulting groups. Okay,
Right.
for him.
Uh-huh.
My feeling is when that decision is made, we go either one or the other, or we say none. I would like, say, for example, council says, I think we should hire Envision to do the plan. Now, I would like this group, and yes, I do have your application, yes, I have looked at it, but I am waiting to see what council's going to do before I name this group, if that makes sense. I would like this group to work with either one, or if they say, we don't, it's not money we want to spend, then I will put this group together.
That's a very fair question. I mean, very fair answer. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Sure.
And that's all I have. Thank
Mr.
you.
President, can I say something? to Mr.
You
Lee?
feel free. Why not?
This is goes back to the earlier, well, but I know that you're a talk person.
Yeah.
And I think that means you're talking out to the community. And I think that there's one thing that is a concern from a legal standpoint, is that jetty or pier out in the lake, they stop the flow of sand or land, to the east.
That's correct.
And there was a lawsuit that was filed regarding pier in the harbor that was built out in North Haven.
Yeah, I got you. That's fine.
Well, put that down. I talked about it, but out in North Perry, there was a big lawsuit by people
They were down the street.
that were down the street. And I'm not exactly sure how that all got resolved, but that would be something that would have to be considered to do people down seeing, we're complaining that structure that Perry put out destroyed their, so you have to be mindful of all.
I have to thank you. That's an excellent point. It's absolutely correct. On the downstream side of the jetty, there tends to be a dirt sand accumulation. That's what's, so if you look at other developed areas where there is littoral drift, or including the ocean, there's generally a series of jetties. And it's up to, and I've had the Corps of Engineers meet with me at my property, adjacent properties, and discuss this. And to do any of this, you're going to need Corps of Engineers approval. And they're going to regulate how far out you can go, whether it's 40 feet or 100 feet or so on. And the neighbors that would be affected, which is generally only within a couple hundred feet, need to be notified and made aware that this, so that, we don't need any lawsuits.
Well, that became quite a to-do out there. I'm not sure how.
Well,
but it
I
was-
don't know if the Corps approved it. And I don't know, if the Corps approved it,
I mean, that's a good fact for North Perry, obviously, but I don't know if the Corps could approve something that part of somebody else's property. I mean, I don't know the answer to those. It'd be something that, people may walk out of here very excited, thinking we're gonna have a beautiful pier out there, and there may be things that have to be looked at. I just wanted to mention.
but those are valid points, and thank you for sharing that. It would have to be one of them too. Some of you, maybe you've been here long enough, I haven't, but I have pictures.
I think you've well exceeded your 10 minutes by now, so.
Almost done, Rob. There used to be a huge.
And everybody else is 10
jetty
minutes.
where the Menor City Park is now. And that created a beach that was over 100 feet of sand in front of my property. When the hurricane tail end ripped that out, and the cribs are still there, you can see it in the water when that jetty was there. The beach disappeared. And all the people's beaches, all the way to my house and on down, more or less disappeared. Some are still there. But there was a beach between the jetty and the lagoons, because the whole lagoon shore structure juts out into the lake. So that still created a beach in that area. Well, you're right. This is why it's something like this, whether you get Hayes or Huffman or whoever, Doug Brown, you're gonna have core involvement. And they're gonna tell you what works and what doesn't work. Plus, I have engineering reports from Willow and other cities who have done this kind of work that can be referred to. So thanks for bringing that up. That's an excellent point. And thanks for your patience.
Anyone else?
I've been to a lot of meetings with lakefront property owners and Army Corps of Engineers who were there. And one of the most interesting comments when I brought up drawings and such was from an Army Corps of Engineer person. Oh, you're gonna affect everybody around you. I'm like, what, if I have a 30-foot drawing, I'm gonna end up with a road to Canada after a few years? No, what happens is, once the Latrell Drift fills up with sand to the end of that, the Latrell Drift continues. You can only bottle up so much sand on the beach. And I found over the years, and I know what you're talking about North Perry and the problems they had up there. It's people that don't do anything, that their property is falling in the lake. They look at somebody that did something and they're blaming them. It's really not the people that put the other structures out there. It's the fact that they did nothing. But it's a cop out to blame because they see they got beat. Well, they got beat because they did something. And the other comment over at Overlook Park, I don't know the gentleman's name, I call him the old guy, from his property now all the way west, it is 100% arbor stone on the shoreline. So if there is a pier there, it's only if you're not going to affect anybody with what's there. And as evident by what happened at Menor Beach Park, and I've told all of the neighbors, put all these rocks along the shoreline, you fish your beach goodbye, you're never going to have it because the waves bounce off of that part of the structure and it just keeps pushing it away.
Unless you never do it, fire that out.
So, one last comment about the rental properties. I've been in the rental business for over 40 years, and I remember 2007, the state passed an ordinance where you had to register your properties, you know, it's 200,000 in the county with the county auditor for rental properties. And I remember as a matter of council meeting, and they're like, well, we only have X number of properties. I'm like, yeah, those are my properties. I was just going, it was registered. But the problem is, they always come back against the landlord. I got involved with Lake Metropolitan Housing one time, and I would never do it again. People were destroying my house. They weren't taking care of it. They just wiped their hands. They would not hold the tenant responsible for anything. They come in and inspect your house before they move in. I said, pull out the pictures. This house was beautiful. Now it's destroyed. They didn't care. There needs to be some addition made to that registration program. He said, register the property, the tenants that live there. And there needs to be some way to make them responsible more so than the landlord for certain. There are things obviously the landlord needs to be responsible for, but you start putting trash in the yard, not cutting the grass and other things. And there's only so much you can do as a landlord to take it to court. And if they destroy your property, worse, it becomes territory damages your property. And the other thing is, you take them to court after they leave, after they damage your property, they move, you don't know where they're at. The piece of paper you get from the court for your judgment, you know what. And it's like if the rental properties had to register who was there was a database somewhere that said, oh, Mr. XYZ is now living still in the county, but he owes me $20,000. I know where he's at now. I can, but that doesn't exist. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close this portion of the meeting to the public. We will now move on to announcements and settings of meetings. Regular meeting of the council was rescheduled to Monday, November 7th, 2022 at 7 PM. Planning and zoning is Monday, November 7th at 6 PM. Public hearing on ordinance number 2022-0-19 is Monday, November 7th, 2022 at 7 PM.
Ordinance,
Ordinance.
since it's already blocked on the calendar for Monday the 17th, does that date and 6 PM time work? 17th.
Being the 14th or into November? You're looking at October.
Sorry, I got the wrong calendar.
Yes. You sure it's not the 21st?
Yeah, I was looking at the wrong calendar. November 1st at 6 PM.
It's Tuesday.
Yes.
That's it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So November 1st, 6 PM, our agenda will be the right of way and rental inspections.
Okay, any other meetings?
Community development.
Community development.
If you want to do that on the first also,
That would be fine.
it's 7 PM. Is that okay with you?
Yep.
Mary, but would you be available to attend that meeting with us?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Is it November 1st?
November 1st.
November 1st.
Okay, any other meetings?
Just one quick point. The reason that the council meeting was rescheduled to Monday, November 7th is because election day is Tuesday, November 8th.
Yes, but we don't vote in here anymore, so it really didn't matter.
Oh, but that's why.
Not according to me, but okay.
Okay.
I still wanted it on Tuesday. Y'all can vote earlier. Anyway, any other meetings? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So many.
Second,
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Excuse me, Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye, this meeting is adjourned.